to you of detachment, I do not mean coldness, nor indifference, nor the sterile separation that a spirit devoid of love might imagine. Detachment is not a denial of the world. It is the hidden organ by which we breathe in the atmosphere of eternity, while standing firmly upon the earth. It is the recognition that what you grasp too tightly in fear will inevitably escape you, while what you release into the vast current of life returns with a greater fullness than you dare to imagine. We live in a time when people cling desperately to possessions, to people, to ideals, and even to their own images of themselves. Yet it is precisely this clinging that suffocates the psyche. The secret power of detachment is that it liberates psychic energy from the cramped claws of compulsion and releases it into the broad fields of creativity, désir and peace. Peace and desire may sound like opposites. When I say peace brings desire, you might imagine a contradiction, as if the still lake of the soul could suddenly boil with longing. But what I mean is that true peace, the peace born of detachment, does not extinguish desire. Rather, it purifies it, reveals its deeper root, and directs it toward the union of the self with its hidden wholeness. The restless desire that torments humanity is but a shadow of this deeper longing. You think you desire a person or wealth or recognition, but beneath these projections lies the soul's yearning for the self, for that archetypal wholeness that shimmers in dream and symbol, that visits us in moments of quiet ecstasy, that calls us beyond the prison of ego. Peace is not the absence of desire, it is the condition in which authentic desire can emerge without distortion. You must understand that when I speak of desire, I do not mean merely the instinctual impulses of the flesh, though these too have their rightful place in the great architecture of the psyche. Désir, in its truest form, is the magnetic pull of the soul toward individuation. It is the anima calling to the man, the animus calling to the woman, the shadow whispering from the hidden cellar, the divine child crying for birth. But when the ego is chained to its objects, when it cannot release what it holds, then desire becomes distorted into craving. Craving is the fevered grasping of the ego, while desire is the divine current flowing from the depths of the unconscious. And this is why detachment is necessary. It silences the ego's clamor so that the true desire may speak. Imagine a dream. A woman stands before a fountain, and in her arms she holds a vessel. She longs to fill it with the waters of the fountain, yet she clutches it so tightly that no water can enter. The vessel trembles, cracked under the force of her grip, and the fountain continues to flow, unheeded, unentered. This is the image of the ego that clings, but if she loosens her hands, if she allows the vessel to open, then the waters pour in, overflowing, abundant. Detachment is not the breaking of the vessel, but the opening of the hands. It is the surrender that allows the waters of life to fill us. This fountain is the unconscious, the deep reservoir of archetypal images, and only when the ego ceases its anxious grasping does the water of desire flow freely. You have all experienced this in moments you scarcely recognized. Perhaps you longed desperately for love, and when you chased it with every ounce of energy, it eluded you. But when you surrendered, when you ceased the frantic chase, Love appeared unbidden, as if from nowhere, or you struggled with a creative problem, tightening your mind around it, like a vice, until you fell into exhaustion and let it go. And in the stillness, the solution rose like a dream. This is the paradox by detachment. Desire is not extinguished but fulfilled. By letting go, the psyche receives what it truly seeks. Peace is the soil in which authentic desire takes root, for only in peace is the soil fertile and untrampled. Let me tell you what happens in the unconscious when you practice detachment. The unconscious is not a passive storehouse. It is a living realm teeming with images, archetypes, and currents of energy. When the ego clings to its obsessions, the unconscious withdraws, becoming hostile or distorted. The archetypes are forced into the shadows where they emerge as compulsions, addictions, neuroses. You may believe you are pursuing love, but in truth, you are pursued by the shadow of your unlived self. But when you release your grip, when you allow detachment, the unconscious begins to flow again. The anima or animus can emerge not as a destructive possession, but as a guide. The shadow can appear not as a tormentor, but as a teacher. The self, which is the secret center of the psyche, can send forth its subtle radiance, guiding you toward wholeness. I have seen many patients who suffered because they could not let go. A man clings to the image of his father's approval, though his father is long dead. A woman clings to the fantasy of eternal youth, though time demands transformation. A seeker clings to the certainty of dogma, though the soul thirsts for mystery. Each of these clings out of fear, and in each case, the psychic energy that might have served life is trapped in sterile repetition. But when, through analysis or through the grace of a dream, they learned to release, their lives began to unfold with new meaning. Peace descended, not as emptiness, but as fullness. Their desires, once distorted, became aligned with the deeper currents of their soul. You must not confuse detachment with repression. Repression is the act of pushing desire into the shadows, of denying its voice. Detachment is listening without clutching, observing without enslaving. It is the capacity to say, yes, I feel this longing. Yes, I acknowledge this passion, but I will not force it into the mold of ego's demand. I will allow it to ripen in its own season. This is the peace that brings desire, for desire that is forced too soon becomes compulsion, while desire that matures in peace becomes revelation. If you look into the great spiritual traditions, you will see this truth mirrored again and again. The yogi speaks of vairagya, the detachment that brings union with the divine. The Christian mystic speaks of poverty, of spirit, the letting go that allows God to enter. The Taoist speaks of wu wei, the effortless action born of surrender. All these are variations of the same archetypal truth that peace, born of detachment, is the condition in which authentic desire blossoms. But in psychology, we speak of it as the dynamic interplay between ego and self, between consciousness and the unconscious. The archetypes demand space, and when the ego is too crowded, with its own grasping. There is no room for them to speak. Detachment clears that space. It is the silence in which the self can be heard. Perhaps you wonder why this is so difficult. If detachment brings peace, and peace brings desire, why do we cling? The answer lies in the fear of death. To release is to die a little, to surrender control, to step into the unknown. The ego is terrified of death, and so it clings. But the paradox is that in clinging, it brings about the very death it fears, the slow death of psychic stagnation. Whereas in detachment, though it feels like dying, one is in truth reborn. The archetypes teach us this through symbols. The seed must fall into the ground and die to become a tree. The sun must set to rise again. The hero must descend into the underworld to return transformed. Detachment is a little death, but it is the death that opens the door to life. I once had a dream that revealed this power to me. I stood in a vast hall filled with treasures of every kind: gold, jewels, books, relics, and I felt an overwhelming desire to grasp them all. But each time I reached, they turned to dust in my hands. At last, exhausted, I sank down upon the floor, empty-handed, and then, from the ceiling, a single drop of water fell into my hands. It grew, becoming a spring, and from it flowed all the riches of life, not as objects to grasp, but as living waters to drink. This was the message of the unconscious, that only when I ceased grasping could the true treasure appear. Detachment revealed the deeper desire, not for possessions, but for the living flow of life itself. The great illusion of our time is that fulfillment comes by accumulation, that peace can be purchased through more possessions, that happiness is the fruit of conquest. Yet, those who have accumulated everything often discover an emptiness more profound than poverty. Why? Because the psyche does not hunger for objects, it hungers for meaning. The more one clings to objects, the further one drifts from meaning, and meaning is never captured by grasping. It is born of a quiet openness, a readiness to be touched by the deeper currents of the soul. Detachment, therefore, is not renunciation in the ascetic sense of sterile denial. It is renunciation of illusion, of the false belief that the ego can secure life by force. It is the choice to allow life to come as it will, to recognize the hidden wisdom in what arrives and in what departs. You will notice this when you reflect upon your own relationships. Many of you have loved in such a way that your love suffocated its object. The fear of losing the beloved made you clutch more tightly, and the more you clutched, the more the beloved withered. For love requires space, just as a flame requires air. Detachment does not mean the absence of love. It is the condition that allows love to breathe. It is a recognition that the beloved is not yours to possess, but a symbol of the divine within them, a living image of the archetype of union. When you love in detachment, you see beyond the personal mask to the eternal essence shining through. And in this way, your love becomes not less, but infinitely more. In dreams, the unconscious often portrays this lesson with symbols of flight. How often do we dream of birds, of wings, of floating above the ground. These are archetypal images of release. The psyche yearns to soar above the weight of ego's chains. A patient once told me of a recurring dream. He tried to hold a bird in his hands, but the more he grasped, the more lifeless it became. Only when he opened his hands and allowed the bird to fly did he feel the joy of union with its flight. This dream expressed his soul's demand for detachment, for only in letting the bird fly could he participate in its life. So it is with all things we love. Clutch them and they wither. Release them and they reveal their true vitality. Desire that arises in peace is a different kind of fire. It is not the frantic hunger of the ego, but the luminous flame of the self. This flame does not consume, it illuminates. You may feel it when gazing upon art that stirs something eternal in you, when walking in nature and sensing the whisper of the divine, when meeting a soul who awakens in you a recognition older than time. Such desires are not about possession, they are about participation in the mystery. They draw you beyond yourself, into communion with what is greater, and you will notice they come when you are still, when you have ceased to grasp, when you are at peace. Peace does not extinguish desire. It unveils its sacred root. The archetypes themselves teach us this rhythm. Consider Eros, the archetypal image of desire. Eros is often portrayed as a winged god, a child with arrows, unpredictable, playful and dangerous. He wounds us with longing, but his wings remind us that longing cannot be chained. To force Eros is to distort him into obsession, but to honor him with detachment is to allow his arrow to guide us toward the greater union of soul and self. Consider also the archetype of the wise old man who appears in dreams. At moments of crisis, he counsels patience, trust, and surrender. He reminds us that the way to the treasure is not through frantic striving, but through stillness. When the wise old man speaks, he speaks of detachment, and then consider the archetype of the death-rebirth cycle, seen in countless myths. Osiris torn apart and reassembled, Christ crucified and resurrected, the phoenix consumed in flames and reborn from ash. Each image reveals the same pattern. You must let go. You must die to what you cling to in order for life to be renewed. Detachment is the death that makes rebirth possible, but we resist. The ego resists because it confuses detachment with annihilation. Yet look carefully, and you will see that every significant transformation in your life was preceded by a letting go. You left a place you thought you could not leave, and only then did you find new horizons. You released a relationship you thought was your only source of love, and only then did love return in another form. You surrendered an ideal that once defined you, and only then did you discover a deeper truth. Detachment is always the threshold. To cross it feels like loss, but beyond it lies the field of possibility. I recall another dream shared by a woman who had suffered many losses. In her dream, she stood by a river, clutching a heavy chest filled with treasures. The river surged, demanding the chest. She resisted, fearing to lose all she had. At last, exhausted, she let the chest fall into the current. She wept as it sank beneath the waters. Yet moments later, the river began to return its gifts, jewels transformed into living flowers, gold turned into radiant fish, books turned into singing birds. The message was clear: what you surrender to the unconscious is not lost but transformed. This is the alchemy of detachment. By surrendering, we allow the psyche to transmute what we cling to into something living, something that serves the whole. Now, you may ask, how does one practice detachment? This is not a technique, not a trick of the mind, but an attitude of soul. It requires trust in the wisdom of the unconscious, faith that the self is guiding even in darkness. Practically, it may begin with a simple act of observation. When desire arises, notice it. Instead of immediately grasping, pause, ask yourself, what is the root of this desire? Is it a craving of the ego or a longing of the soul? In this pause lies detachment, in the willingness to wait, to listen, to trust. Peace arises, and in that peace, the deeper desire reveals itself. Detachment also comes through the symbolic life. Engage with dreams, with art, with ritual. These open the psyche to dimensions beyond the ego. They remind us that life is not only literal, but symbolic, that what we lose in form returns in image. The symbolic life trains us to release our grip on the literal and to trust the currents of meaning. A dream may show you that the loss of a job is not merely economic despair, but initiation into a new path. A painting may reveal that your loneliness is not emptiness, but preparation for deeper union. The symbolic life cultivates detachment by showing us that everything is more than it seems, that what departs in one form returns in another. Peace, then, is not passivity. It is an active openness, a vigilant trust. It is the soil in which the soul's true desire grows, and when desire grows from peace, it does not destroy. It creates art, love, wisdom, compassion. It creates a life aligned with the self. To live in detachment is not to renounce life, but to embrace it more fully, without fear, without compulsion, without distortion. It is to live in rhythm with the archetypes, in harmony with the great dance of death and rebirth. As I speak these words, I sense within you both resistance and longing. Resistance, because the ego fears to let go. Longing, because the soul knows the truth of what I say. You stand between these two forces, as all humanity does. The choice before you is not easy, but it is the only choice that leads to wholeness. You must dare to detach, to trust the unconscious, to enter peace. Then, and only then, will you discover the true power of desire, the desire that leads you to yourself, the desire that unites you with the eternal mystery. When we speak of detachment as the secret power that brings peace, we must also recognize its shadow. Every light casts a shadow, and detachment is no exception. There is a counterfeit detachment that is not born of peace but of numbness. Many people retreat into this false detachment when they cannot bear the pain of desire. They withdraw, they close the heart, they harden the psyche against longing. But this is not Peace, it is paralysis. Such a state is not fertile soil for desire, but barren desert. It is repression disguised as serenity, apathy, masquerading as wisdom. The difference is subtle but profound. True detachment feels alive, vibrant, full of trust in the unfolding of life. False detachment feels dead, cold, cynical. In the one, the unconscious flows freely. In the other, it is dammed and stagnant. The task of the soul is to discern between the two. You may recognize this counterfeit detachment in dreams of frozen landscapes, of lifeless deserts, of houses where all the windows are sealed. These are symbols of a psyche that has withdrawn from desire out of fear. But when true detachment appears in dream, it is often accompanied by water, by open skies, by images of release and transformation. I once encountered a man who dreamt he was floating down a river without paddles, trusting the current to carry him. He awoke terrified, thinking he had lost control, yet in analysis, and he came to see that this was the unconscious urging him toward trust, toward genuine detachment. The current was the self, and to surrender to it was not death, but life. Peace is not the absence of struggle, but the presence of trust. Many imagine peace as a state of eternal stillness, like a flat line on a monitor, but this is not peace, it is death. Peace in the psyche is more akin to music, a rhythm of tension and resolution, a harmony of opposites. It does not deny struggle, but it frames struggle within a greater wholeness. Detachment does not mean you will never feel longing, grief, or anger. It means you will not be enslaved by them. You will allow them their voice, but you will not mistake them for the whole truth. You will not cling to them as if your life depended upon them. You will let them come, and you will let them go. And in this rhythm, peace arises. From this peace, désir émerge purified, like gold, refined in the fire. Consider the archetype of the lover. The lover in its distorted form is consumed by possession, by jealousy, by endless craving. But the lover in its true form is detached, not because it does not love, but because it loves more deeply than possession allows. It sees the beloved as a symbol of the divine, and thus it does not cling. It allows the beloved to be free, to unfold, to be themselves. This is love born of peace. And it is from this peace that the true desire of the lover arises, the desire not to own, but to unite, not to consume, but to commune. You can see here how detachment does not kill desire, but elevates it. It transforms eros from obsession into sacred union. This same principle applies to creativity. Many artists strangle their own work by grasping too tightly at it, demanding perfection, forcing inspiration. Their desire becomes distorted into anxiety, and the work withers. But when they release control, when they allow detachment, creativity flows as if from another realm. They become vessels rather than masters. Peace gives rise to desire, and desire gives birth to art. The alchemists understood this when they spoke of the opus, the great work. They want that the work could not be forced, that it required patience, surrender, and detachment, for the fire of transformation could not be controlled by ego, but only tended in peace. So too with the artist, and indeed with every human being, for each life is itself a work of art in the making. And so we come to the archetype of the self. The self is the secret center, the totality of the psyche, the union of opposites. It is both the goal and the guide of individuation. Yet the self cannot be grasped by force. It reveals itself only in detachment. You cannot will the self into consciousness. You can only create the conditions in which it may emerge. Those conditions are peace, openness, surrender. The self appears in dreams as a mandala, a divine child, a radiant figure. It comes not when you demand it, but when you are still enough to receive it. This is why peace brings desire, because peace creates the space in which the self can call, and self's call is the deepest desire of all. You may feel in these words a certain paradox, that peace both stills desire and awakens it, that detachment both releases longing and fulfills it. But life itself is paradox. The psyche is not a straight line. It is a spiral, a dance of opposites. Detachment and desire are not enemies but partners in this dance. Without detachment, desire is distorted into craving. Without desire, detachment is distorted into emptiness. Together, they form the rhythm of the soul. Peace holds desire in its arms, and desire enlivens peace with its fire. The secret power of detachment is that it allows this dance to unfold without distortion, without enslavement, without fear. Now, you may ask, what does this mean for your daily life? It means that when you face loss, you need not despair, for what is lost in form returns in another. It means that when you feel longing, you need not cling, for longing itself is a message from the self, guiding you toward wholeness. It means that when you love, you can love without fear, for detachment does not diminish love, but sanctifies it. It means that when you create, you can trust the unconscious to provide, for inspiration arises not from force but from surrender. It means that you can live with openness, with trust, with peace, and in this peace you will find desire, not the desire of the ego, but the desire of the soul. Let me share one final dream before we pause. A young man came to me, restless, driven, unable to find peace. He dreamt he stood in a marketplace, surrounded by countless stalls, each shouting for his attention. He rushed from one to the next, grasping objects, dropping them, seeking more. He awoke exhausted. But later, another dream came. This time he sat quietly in the same marketplace, eyes closed, hands open. One by one, figures came to him, placing gifts in his lap, gifts of wisdom, of love, of creativity. He realized he did not need to chase them. They would come when he was ready. This dream revealed to him the secret of detachment. By releasing his frantic striving, he made space for the unconscious to bring him what he truly desired. Peace brought desire, desire brought wholeness. This is the mystery I invite you to live, not to grasp, not to cling, not to flee into numbness, but to dwell in the fertile stillness of detachment. There, in the silence, you will hear the voice of the self. There, in the peace, desire will awaken. Not the distorted desire of craving, but the sacred desire that leads you to wholeness. And if you dare to trust this path, you will discover that detachment is not loss but abundance, not death but life, not emptiness but fullness. For in detachment, you touch the eternal, and from the eternal flows all that you truly long for. The path of detachment is not a flight from life, but a deepening into its mystery. To detach is not to escape, but to see without the fog of compulsion, without the distortion of ego's frantic grasping. When you are detached, you see life in its symbolic radiance. Every encounter becomes a mirror of the self, every loss a ritual of transformation, every desire a messenger of wholeness. You cease to ask, how can I control this? And begin to ask, what is life revealing through this? This shift is the very essence of individuation. For individuation is not the conquest of the world, but the discovery of meaning within it. And meaning emerges only when you are willing to release your demand that life conform to your ego's plan. Let me speak to you of death. For it is the ultimate teacher of detachment. All of life is a preparation for death, not in morbid fear, but in sacred recognition. Each letting go is a rehearsal for that final release. Each detachment a practice for the ultimate surrender. If you cling to life as possession, death comes as terror. But if you live in detachment, death comes as fulfillment. It is the final opening of the hands, the final trust in the current of the self. Many dreams of the dying reveal these images of rivers, of journeys, of doors opening to light. The unconscious prepares the soul by teaching it again and again to let go. This is why peace brings desire, because peace is the soul's preparation for eternity. And desire is its longing to unite with the eternal. But let us return to the living, for death teaches us how to live, not merely how to die. When you live in detachment, you live in rhythm with the archetypes. You feel the shadow without being destroyed by it. You welcome the anima or animus without being possessed by it. You face the trickster without being deceived. You listen to the wise old man or woman without idolizing them. You honor the self without attempting to own it. This is the way of peace. And from this peace arises the only desire that does not betray you, the desire to become whole. This desire is not quenched by time, nor stolen by circumstance. It is the flame that burns in every soul, waiting for the moment when detachment clears the space for it to shine. Think of the alchemical vessel, the crucible. The alchemists knew that the work required a sealed vessel, but also the fire beneath it. Detachment is the vessel, desire is the fire. Without the vessel, the fire consumes and destroys. Without the fire, the vessel holds nothing. Together, they transmute lead into gold, ego into self. This is not a metaphor only, it is the living reality of the psyche. Your life is the alchemical work, and every moment of detachment, every moment of desire purified by peace, is a step in the transmutation of the soul. The gold you seek is not outside you. It is the wholeness already present in the self, waiting to be revealed. You may feel now the stirring of this desire within you. It is not the desire for more possessions, more conquests, more acclaim. It is the desire to be whole, to be reconciled with the opposites within, to live in communion with the mystery that gave you life. This desire cannot be fulfilled by clinging, for it is not an object to be seized. It can only be fulfilled by surrender, by detachment, by peace. And yet, paradoxically, when you release, you discover that this desire fulfills itself, for the self seeks you as much as you seek it. The eternal longs for you as much as you long for it. Detachment is the gesture that allows this longing to meet, this union to occur. In the stillness of detachment, you will begin to notice the subtle voice of the unconscious. It comes in dreams, in symbols, in synchronicities. These are not accidents, but messages, threads woven by the self into the fabric of your life. When you are consumed by ego's craving, you miss them. But when you are at peace, you see them, you hear them, you recognize them. A bird crossing your path, a phrase in a book, a dream in the night, all reveal the guidance of the self. Desire purified by peace is the magnet that draws you toward these moments of meaning. And meaning is the food of the soul. Without it, life starves. With it, even suffering becomes bearable. For it is woven into a larger pattern. I tell you now that the world is in crisis, because it has forgotten this secret. We live in a culture of endless craving, of compulsive grasping, of ego inflated to monstrous proportions. We mistake craving for desire, possession for love, accumulation for meaning. We have lost the art of detachment, and therefore we have lost peace. Without peace, desire becomes distorted, destructive, consuming. We see this in addiction, in greed, in violence. Humanity is starving for the peace that gives birth to authentic desire. And so the task before each of you is not merely personal, but collective. To live in detachment is not only to save your soul, but to heal the world. For when you embody peace, you become a vessel through which authentic desire can flow, and that desire creates rather than destroys. Do not imagine this is easy. It will demand courage. For to detach is to die 1,000 little deaths, but each death is also a birth. Each surrender opens the way for a deeper fullness. You will be asked to release what you thought defined you, to surrender what you thought you could not live without, and in the emptiness you will discover a fullness greater than all you lost. This is the mystery of detachment, that by losing you gain, by releasing you receive, by dying you are reborn. This is not theory but living truth, proven again and again in the lives of those who dare the path of individuation. So I invite you now, as you listen, to imagine your own hands opening. What are you clutching that must be released? A fear, a person, an image of yourself, a desire distorted into craving. Let it fall. Let it return to the current of life. Trust that what is yours will return in another form. transmuted, alive. Trust that peace will bring the desire that leads you home. For you are not abandoned. The self has been seeking you from the beginning, calling you through every longing, every loss, every dream. The secret power of detachment is simply this. It allows you to hear that call, to feel that desire, to follow it into the fullness of who you are. And when you follow it, you will find that peace and desire are no longer opposites, but one. Peace will be the ground upon which you stand. Desire the flame that lights your path. You will not fear loss, for you will know that nothing essential can be lost. You will not fear longing, for you will know it as the voice of the self. You will not fear death, for you will know it as the final detachment that fulfills every desire. You will walk in the world with open hands, with a still heart, with a soul aflame. This is the life of wholeness. This is the life of meaning. This is the life to which detachment calls you. So remember, the fountain flows when the hands are open. The bird flies when the grasp is released. The river carries you when you cease to resist. The self reveals itself when the ego surrenders. Peace brings desire, and desire, purified by peace, leads you home. Trust this, live this, and you will discover the secret power of detachment. It is the power of life itself, flowing through you, carrying you, transforming you, and in that flow, you will find not only yourself, but the eternal mystery from which you come and to which you return.